a little bit later, what we'll need to do is go through the survey forms that SEAI issue. So we'll do that towards the end. What we want to do now though is basically repeat what we did upstairs, downstairs. So the first thing we'll do is get the overall dimensions again for the width of the house and the length of the house. Even though we've already done it upstairs, we'll do it again for downstairs. First thing we do when we're downstairs is again we take our measurements. So we'll get the dimension across the width of the room in the kitchen, which is in fact the width of the house. So that's fairly straightforward in this case. So we'll take that, and it is 5.083. Okay, and then what we would do is we'll open these doors. That will allow us a clean line of sight from the front of the house to the back. So if we can find a clear line of sight all the way through, we'll get a clean line of sight and take our dimension. And it is 7387. So record that. So just like upstairs, we will then plot the footprint of the building for the downstairs in exactly the same way. So we'll just count out the squares so that we keep it in reasonable scale. In this case for downstairs it's 20 squares across and 31 down. So by using squared paper it just makes it that you can get your proportions right, and it's an easier job. So we'll plot on the footprint of downstairs, and then we'll do each room individually as we did upstairs. And we will plot each room then on this sketch. And then, as you know, downstairs we have one other little thing to do with regard to the living room. So we'll deal with that when we get to it. So I'm going to mark on these dimensions. So that was 5.083, and this one 7.387. And you will notice that they will not be the same as the dimensions we took upstairs, but that's just natural. We'll start off on our downstairs survey in the kitchen. So I like to stand in the direction that I've drawn it. So in front of us here we have our patio doors, so we'll mark them on the sketch, and at this stage we're just putting them in, as I say, diagrammatically. We're not actually measuring them on the drawing, just to show that where they are. And then we just note that up on the drawing. We'll physically measure the size of the patio doors, just like we did the windows. And that's 1757. And then we can measure it down. So it is 1757 by 2077. And because these are glazed patio doors, they're effectively windows, so we'll record them as such. And they are again double glazed. They're actually, the patio doors are not PVC, it's aluminium. So we'll record it as double glazed, draft stripped aluminium, and they will be 12 mil. The spacer bar between the glazing is 12 mil. We'll just measure the window opening and record that, 1139. So 1139 by 1045. And these windows are the same as upstairs. They are PVC. And they're draft stripped, double glazed, and 16. Okay. So that's the windows covered. We now look and we see that there are two vents. There's one up here on the top right hand corner, and that's not a closable one, so we'll record that as a vent. You will also notice on top of the cupboards, if we stand back far enough, we will see a little duct that runs from the cooker hood. So that's a second vent, and I would note that up as a fan. And then on the top left hand corner of the kitchen wall, there is another vent. And again, it's not a closable one, so we'll record that as a vent. So we're just doing the same as we did upstairs. We will now have a look at the radiator. And the radiator, again, does not have a TRV. The last thing down in the kitchen we have to look at, we have the lights up in the ceiling, and they are two regular incandescent light bulbs, which I call high energy light bulbs, so we record them as such. And there is another thing I need to do. I just need to record the distance to the wall, which I haven't done yet, so we'll just do that now while I remember. So that's 3058, so we'll just plot that on the drawing. 3058, and that goes all the way across. We have double doors in the middle, and then we have the door into the hall, so we'll just mark them on. And it's that way, and our double doors open in here. And I'm going to make a note of that dimension, 3058. You will notice upstairs the only dimensions that we recorded were the overall dimensions, because upstairs we're not really interested in the size of the rooms, whereas downstairs we are interested in the size of the rooms. So 3058. Okay, and I have the dimension across that direction. So from the dimensional survey point of view, in the kitchen we finished. We will be coming back and looking at the boiler and such, but we'll do that when we have finished the dimensional side of things in the room next door. So we can go in there and finish that. Okay, so we have now completed our dimensional survey of both upstairs and downstairs, and we can see here we've recorded on our sketches. So we got the first floor and the ground floor. So as part of the dimensional survey though, we need to determine which room we can call the living area. And in this house in particular, we've got basically two public rooms. The living room, which is at the front of the house, on this side over here. And then the room we're in, which is the kitchen. But the kitchen is not a separate kitchen, it's a kitchen with a dining area. And because the kitchen and dining area are not separated, we must include the whole room. So from our survey we can determine which of these two rooms is the biggest, and that's the one that we choose as being our living area. And I've done that quick calculation. On the ground floor, when we come in the hallway, we've got a living room which has the fireplace in it, and next to that then we have a dining area and a kitchen area. There's no separation between the dining area and kitchen area, so that entire room there is one single room, and we count that as a public room, and we count the living room as a public room. And to determine the living area, we look at which of these two rooms is the biggest. And by measuring up, we can see that this room here, the kitchen and dining area combined, is the living area. Another item of information that we need to have about the property is its orientation. Now we can use a compass to get that information, or it's also possible to have a look on Google Maps or Google Earth, and that will give it to us in as accurate a degree as we need it to be. So as it turns out, this particular property, the rear aspect of it is facing north. Okay, so we're in the actual living room, the front room of the house, and that contains this open fire open grate fire in the chimney breast. Now, from the software deep, we are asked to input the main heating system and a secondary heating system. The main heating system here we'll be looking at in a minute, but it's radiators and it's operated off a gas boiler. The secondary heating system would be classed as this open fire in the grate, and it would be under the room heaters. So what we need to do is just record that that's here, take a photograph, and then we'll input that into deep. Okay, in the hallway, as part of our dimensional survey, we have our front door. And you notice on the front door, on the left hand side of it, we have glazing panels. Now, when we have glazing panels on the left hand side, and we have glazing panels in the actual door itself. Now, when a door is less than 30% glazing, we disregard the glazing completely and treat it as a solid door. If it's 60% glazing or more, we treat it as if it was fully glazed and treat it as a window. But when it's between 30 and 60% glazing, we treat it as a glazed door. And we have different ways, or we have a way of dealing with that in the software. So while we're on site, we need to determine whether this door is a solid door, is a glazed door, or is in fact a window. And by looking at it, we can tell that it's not going to be a window, but it might be a glazed door. Now, the glazing on this side, I would normally treat that as if it's a window, separate from the door. To me, the door is the bit you physically open and walk through. If it's fixed like this and glazing in it, I treat it as a window. So the glazing we're looking at within this door opening is the glazing here. And when we measure it, we can measure it on site, record it is in fact double glazed. It's a timber frame, or the door is timber and a timber frame around it, and it's double glazed, and the space between the glazing in fact is only 6 millimeters. So we need to make a note of that, and then when we measure the size of this glazing, and we measure it from here to here, and the fact that we have this little detail at the top, we tend to take an average dimension from there down, and we'll base our decision on those dimensions, and they work out to be 270 millimeters across, and from there down is 1 meter and 10 millimeters, and we have 2 of them. So when we go back to the office, we'll also measure the size of the door opening itself, and then when we have all that information and go back to the office, we can then do our little calculation, see what percentage of glazing we have, and then categorize it depending on whether it's less than 30%, between 30 and 60, or greater than 60. So it's just important that when you're on site to take those dimensions and record them before you leave. Okay, so still in the hallway, one thing to point out to you, just to note, not to forget, that if there is a cupboard or some access in under the stairs, just to have a quick look in to check and see. If it's just a cupboard, just to check and see whether or not there's any lighting in it. If there's a light fitting in there, then we must take that into account and categorize it as either a CFL or an incandescent light bulb. In this case here, when we look in, we can see that there is no light fitting in there, so we can then just close the door and ignore it and not take any more account of it. What we need to look at now is the heating system itself, and have a look at the boiler. The boiler in this case is located here in the kitchen. We can see it's a Ferroli type boiler. Now, there are no other markings on here to identify it to us as to what model it is, to allow us to later determine what efficiency it has. But this data plate underneath the boiler, we can see here that it gives us the name Ferroli, which we knew from earlier on. But what we need, the information we need then, is this model, and it's a tempera. Okay, now in some boiler manufacturers, they have a number of different models, but for this one anyway, Ferroli tempera. In a lot of the boilers, in fact, there's a little flap here that can pop down, and the data plate will be in there. So it's a case of finding that data plate and getting the information from it, so you can later either look it up in the HARP database or look it up on the SEDbook database. to determine its efficiency. So another thing that we need to record while we're here is this control device. In this case here, it's a fairly basic, simple timer. But again, it's something that we need from a controls point of view in the deep software. So record that it's there, take a photograph, know that it's just a timer. It is no programmer type thing for temperature and time. This is just deals with time. So as I say, record that and we'll be able to input that into the deep software later.